take you through an overview of protected areas in Seychelles, give you just a brief overview of the financing situation in Seychelles, and then go into more detail on the financial autonomy of protected areas, as well as conservation trust funds, both of which I understand participants are interested in, but where Seychelles we have some current experience which might be interesting. And then I understand we have a question and answer session after my presentation. So I'll crack on. As Hervé's mentioned, the protected area system in Seychelles is changing, and we're in a really exciting period where the current protected area system is made up of special reserves, marine and terrestrial national parks that accumulate 557 kilometers squared, which is relatively small at the moment, but things are changing significantly. As part of the Marine Spatial Planning Initiative, Seychelles is committed to 400,000 square kilometers of new protected areas, where there will be new IUCN categories from everything from special reserve down to sustainable use areas. There will be new management models where the private sector will be enabled to manage protected areas, as well as under co-management agreements with NGOs, as well as fisheries groups. And there will also be significant changes in how these areas are managed and supported. One thing we do know is, from a cost point of view, climate change is already and will continue to increase the cost of protected area management, as we see issues around coral bleaching, coastal erosions, and even cyclones, for example. So what we do know is that collaboration and coordination is critical. Seychelles, as you know, is only has 90,000 inhabitants. So in order to try and manage such a vast area with such complex ecosystems, collaboration between departments, between projects, between community groups is going to be essential. And that's something that the government of Seychelles is actively trying to pursue. So where does our project fit in? Given the scope and the size of the protected area system and its growth potential, it's going to require significant financing. And this Government of Seychelles UNDP GEF project is geared to try and look at potential options for financing in the future. We're a 5-year project that began in mid-2016, and we've just reached our midterm stage, where we had a midterm review and luckily received a satisfactory rating, so we can continue as scheduled. And our project manager, Dej Roman, is sitting beside me here in our meeting. So if any of you also have questions for him, he's here from a practical project implementation point of view. Our objectives are to try and strengthen the financial sustainability and strategic cohesion between the protected areas in Seychelles, in forming a systemic approach, as well as improving the investment frameworks and the ability of partners to generate their own revenue. And we work with all of the existing protected areas at the moment. So as a brief overview of the financing system in Seychelles, we conducted in 2016 an analysis of the financing in 2014 and 2015. We're about to do the same again at the end of 2018. And what it identified is that the revenue generated by the protected areas was $6.4 million, which unfortunately was 5% less than the year before, but actually only that $5 million was available for protected area management. The reason for that was that government budget goes into the National Parks Authority, which is the state-managed national parks, and all revenue generated from entrance fees goes back into the government consolidated fund, making up that difference. What we did find out from this review was that actually the government, Seychelles National Parks Authority, despite its inefficiencies in the collection system, was generating more revenue from ticket sales than it was receiving from government budget, working out a 6% annual return. There was additional extra budgetary support from the usual areas, such as GEF grants, donations, but also corporate social responsibility, predominantly from the tourism sector, as well as site-based revenue, mainly from entrance fees, was 69% of all revenue. There are additional aspects about mooring fees, research fees, but most of which were from entrance fees. And entrance fees, interestingly, are only applied to foreign tourists that visit Seychelles, not to residents. And in order to determine what was actually required for Seychelles to meet its optimal management needs for the existing protected area system, it required effectively double the amount of revenue, which is quite a significant amount for such a space. And whilst we went through this process, we identified that the organisation with the greatest financing gap was the Seychelles National Parks Authority, but had the ability to generate an extra $2.3 million annually within 5 years based on a few changes. And what I'd like to do is go through some of the changes which happened in the Parks Authority. What we've discovered is, as I mentioned, they're under-resourced, they're budget dependent, and because of this dependency, there's been a lack of investment back into infrastructure, such as the tourism infrastructure. The entrance fees are not directed into conservation, but they are significant and important protected areas that have huge potential. And so one of the main ways in which we identified for the Parks Authority to be able to increase its revenue was no matter how much revenue was generated, unless it was able to retain and reinvest that revenue into conservation, efforts would not be fruitful. And so the project has supported SNPA to start to investigate its financial autonomy. And behind this was really 4 pillars. 1, an ability to be able to generate more revenue. 2, to be able to be cost efficient in how they generated and use that revenue. 3, the ability to be able to plan and utilize that revenue effectively. And 4, the ability to be able to reinvest it into infrastructure that would improve the assets and further generate visitation and revenue opportunities. So under the revenue generation, there were 3 major changes. 1 was to adjust entrance fees according to evidence and willingness to pay surveys, which hadn't been changed within the last decade. 2 was for guests that were staying within or bordering the marine protected areas to contribute entrance fees, which aren't happening at the time. Instead, operators provide a conservation contribution in lieu of entrance fees. And the 3rd was to try and offer different types of tickets, such as a multiple use ticket, which encourages tourists to do more visits per holiday. And from these 3 changes, what we were able to determine was that the Parks Authority would be able to double their revenue generation within their 5-year period, which would be a significant step and effectively close its financing gap. And as a result, SNPA were able to take a whole series of these different types of analyses, put them into a strategic plan, and present that to the government and the Ministry of Finance, which then at the end of last year approved their financial autonomy, which will begin in January 2019. So it's an exciting time, but it doesn't stop there. They now have to basically put these ideas into practice and demonstrate their return on investment. And so whilst adjusting revenue and generating additional revenue is one thing, another aspect that we identified was that Seychelles, the collection of entrance ticket, which is currently paper-based, is relatively inefficient. There was lost income in the system. There were missed opportunities, as well as the efficiency for how we collect and report against that revenue was missing. And so we identified that by introducing a new ticketing system based on an online system, we could improve the efficiency within the fee collection system. And so the Parks Authority now has a new website, which, as you'll see in the bottom left corner, has a online ticket portal, which takes you to its online ticket system, which is complemented by point of sale kiosks at specific fixed points for those that aren't able to get online. And through this system, we anticipate that the Parks Authority be able to increase its revenue captured by 30%. So again, adding another layer of revenue generation for them. And it's not just about the money. It's about the opportunity costs that have been used up from rangers spending an inordinate amount of time collecting tickets and issuing tickets. Now they'll have more time to focus on conservation, which is what our rangers signed up to in the first place. We'll also have an operator management system available so that operators are able to see where they're buying tickets over a long period of time, where their guests are demanding to go to, in order to be able to feed something back to our operators and build those relationships, as well as a customer database, so that we can follow up with visitors to determine how their experience was, what changes they would like to see in the park, and therefore improve the product. Beyond those 2 points, we also needed to identify how or provide training to the parks authorities on how to effectively plan these potentially increased resources in an effective way. We provided management training for all the protected areas, developing applicable planning frameworks, as well as providing opportunities for all the different organizations involved in protected area management to share their experience and come up with a common template for management planning, as well as business plan training for all protected areas, where we didn't just look at the revenue generation, but also the management organization and cost reduction and cost sharing mechanisms before going into financing and marketing plans. An additional aspect of this was we developed a database of, I think it was nearly 70 business plans collected worldwide, which we've shared back through, I think through the BESNet network, as well as through the IUCN networks. So if people would like access to that afterwards, I can provide the link to that Dropbox. So once we've generated revenue, once we've improved the cost efficiency, and we've planned to utilize our revenue more effectively, we also need to be able to present an increased professionalism on the business side of the organization. Remembering that previously we are trying to transition the organization from a purely conservation focused, budget dependent organization into one that, whilst focusing on the conservation, develops its entrepreneurial side, develops its relationship with private operators. So really the organization wants to demonstrate how the improvements in the protected area sites justify the financial changes, and thereby creating greater buy-in from our stakeholders. We want to increase clear communication, developing a strong brand of professionalism, so improving the outward image of the organization, which will help motivate the staff as well. Create more business opportunities for Seychelles, our businesses, is a real key focus, as well as engage local residents in conserving biodiversity. We want as many advocates for biodiversity as we can, and that will help improve the organization's experience. So developing clear and consistent communication, we found was a big issue. On all the trails, the type of information, the format, the layout of information was different in every case. In some cases unclear and confusing, and sometimes contradictory. And so developing a brand guideline for the organization for how they clearly communicate in the future has been very important. And we've used this as a way of using as a template for communication materials, using different templates for the organization that they can then use in the future. These communication materials have then gone back into the park to use for protected area infrastructure. As you see here, we have now up clear information boards on all terrestrial trails using recycled materials. These will also be replicated in all of the parks. Again, clear, consistent messaging. And then the next step is what we're currently in the process now of building the capacity of the rangers to improve how they market and communicate all these changes that are happening. We've noticed that no matter how much work goes into the park, if we're not clearly communicating why we're doing it, it doesn't have the impact that is required. And so this communication and marketing plan helps again with that professionalism of the service, as well as creating greater buy-in from a wider stakeholders. And this also involves now trying to grow its social media presence. So the Parks Authority already has a Facebook site, but now starting to understand how it can use the analytics in the background in order to target its messages to specific audiences, as well as diversify the platforms into things like Twitter and Pinterest. Diversifying these channels as well includes developing a YouTube channel so that they can show videos of what's happening underwater, which are both tourism tools to attract people to the parks, as well as communication tools that can be used in schools. In addition to that, the project has also been building communication tools for all of the protected areas to communicate why investing in protected area generates benefits for everybody in clearly attractive mediums, which are focused at our particular audiences. We're interested in other sectors such as fisheries and tourism, as well as getting school children engaged with how these are important for their areas, as well as developing them for marine and terrestrial parks. And these have all been distributed through the national newspapers. And we'll continue to do so because we can continue to use the same message, as repetition is very useful. And so I was asked to come up with some lessons for other countries. And really some of our take-home messages are: collect the evidence, communicate them clearly. We have in the past been, I guess you could say, criticized for developing over technical information, which the technical information is useful, but it is how you boil it down to those key messages, depending on who you want to accept you or who you want to communicate with. Demonstrating the business case, especially to the Ministry of Finance, is incredibly important. Generating additional finance is important, but it's just the start. Generating revenue is useful, but not if you know how to. But not if you don't know how to effectively utilize it. Cost efficiency and cost savings are often an area of business planning which is underreported, but you can generate significant cost savings just by focusing on this, or additional revenue is available for conservation just by focusing on the cost savings. Take a long-term perspective. You're not just trying to generate revenue, you're also trying to change the way in which people view finance and conservation. Not everybody will agree with you at the start, but it is about trying to create messages that are applicable to different types of stakeholders, and trying to continue the reasons and clearly communicate the reasons why you're trying to do something. It does take time. However, long-term projects or projects with external finance and technical support can help de-risk innovation. If protected area authorities have very tight budgets, they're potentially more risk-adverse to trying new things, as well as businesses that maybe haven't engaged with private national parks authorities and maybe more cautious. So UNDP-GEF projects like these can act as a useful bridging mechanism between those parties and can help de-risk those opportunities. And one final thing I would like to do is on this presentation is that we are tentatively having a side event at the CBD COP. So if you are interested in learning more about the experience of protected area financing in Egypt and Seychelles, we have a side event on the Tuesday, the 27th of November at lunchtime. And we're more than happy to engage with other protected area authorities or other governments or other agencies. And my details are below if you'd like to meet up during this COP if you're attending. So that is my first presentation. And I will very quickly...
Thank you very much, Andrew, for this excellent presentation, which highlights two main mechanisms for financing protected area. Mechanism that can generate additional revenue, but as well mechanism that can improve cost efficiency of marine protected area. I understand that the first presentation was focusing mostly on existing marine protected area, but Seychelles has introduced an innovative financing mechanism for the proposed expansion of marine protected area, and this will be the focus of the second presentation of Andrew.
Thanks, Hervé. So I understand I have 5 minutes for this short presentation, which is given courtesy of the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust Fund. Just for those that I'm sure a lot of you have a great deal of knowledge on trust funds, so I don't need to go through this in large detail. But the main points are that in Seychelles, the SECAT is a legally independent grant-making institution, which effectively acts as a bridge between donors and implementing organizations, is the way in which you could consider it. It has its own act. It is also governed by a public-private board of directors, which is very important that the private sector is represented. Its aim for its grants is to be able to disperse $700,000 per annum from 2018, but doesn't just stop there. It's also trying to explore new opportunities to grow its asset base. And as I deliver this presentation, I very quickly switch hats, and I switch as a member of the finance committee on the SECAT, which is mandated to support SECAT to grow its asset base. The slide that you're looking at the moment is the model for the debt swap and the blue bond. I don't have time to go through it in significant detail, but the real bullet points that I want to try and convey is effectively for the debt swap. This really began with support with the Nature Conservancy, which through its investment arm, NatureVest, provided a blended capital approach with, as you can see, impact capital in terms of loans and grants, which then through SECAT enabled the government to purchase the debt at 93 cents for the dollar, which then allowed SECAT three significant cash flows. One is the repaying of the investor, in this case NatureVest. Two is to be able to capitalize the Blue Grants Fund, which is the bright red box on the left-hand side. And the third is to capitalize the Blue Endowment Fund, which is the red box on the lower right-hand side. What's very interesting with these, and I'll go into these in more detail, is the Blue Grants Fund allows the SECAT to be able to finance on a competitive basis pre-development ideas or pre-development business models which support blue economy principles through their pre-development stage over the next few years, whilst it waits for the Blue Endowment Fund to reach maturity in 2036, where it would have an estimated value of $6.6 million. As you will see on the left-hand side, there is also the new blue bonds, which is very new and only got announced 2 days ago at the Our Oceans conference. And that's a $15 million blue bond, which is, again, a blended capital approach that $3 million of that blue bond goes into the SECAT to be able to complement proceeds into the Blue Grants Fund, as well as $12 million goes into the Development Bank of Seychelles as loans. And these should really be considered as complementary funds, which as a blended capital approach, the grants and then the investment fund being low interest loans, which then helps a business through its J-curve, grants for the pre-development stage, and then it can grow through its growth stage by applying for a loan that is offering a 3 to 4% interest, which is significantly lower than what is currently available in the country. So going through the Blue Grants Fund, it works on a competitive process where there are clear eligibility requirements, and that proposals through a competitive proposal process must support national policies. The fund has 5 strategic arms. The Blue Grants Fund has 5 strategic objectives that it's trying to achieve, supporting new and existing and new protected areas, from everything from special reserves to sustainable use zones. Second being on empowering fisheries to improve sustainability and value addition. Third, on promoting the rehabilitation of coastal habitats and ecosystems. Fourth, for increasing risk reduction and social resilience to the effects of climate change. And fifthly, trialling and nurturing new business models to support blue economy in Seychelles. The first Blue Grants Fund is already in process of disbursement, and $300,000 has already been dispersed for the fisheries sector, focusing on value addition. And there are 5 of the projects which you may not be able to see here. Some interesting ones that are already started is the fish identification database for fishermen to accurately report catches of subspecies, so thereby improving stock monitoring information. And the second one is a fisheries organization on one of the islands piloting voluntary fishery closures in proposed protected areas. So these are the kind of ideas that are already coming up that are demand-based from organizations that they want to try and pursue. The second Blue Grants Fund closure closes in December, and the idea is to be able to disperse $700,000 on 3 focal areas. And then the third Blue Grants Fund will begin in Q1, Q2 next year. Again, $700,000, and the objectives, which strategic objective, are still to be decided. And so, as I explained, how the Blue Grants Fund is really aimed to work, is it's supposed to help nurture these pre-development business models, to help nurture them through a proof of concept stage, so that they could then apply towards the Blue Investment Fund to develop through their growth stage, which would be a loan. And so these are complementary models that work together, just following the basic business J-curve. The Blue Endowment Fund, which received a proportion of the proceeds, effectively allows the SECAT to be able to distribute grants on a perpetual basis from 2036 onwards, based on these 5 strategic areas as well. The current endowment is aiming to try and achieve an absolute rate of return of 7% using a 3-year rolling average. It has got a higher expectation than what is average for conservation trust funds, but that's mainly because other funds are more pushed towards bonds rather than stocks, which historically have lower yields. One thing to note is all stocks and funds invested through the endowment fund are selected ESG screen funds. And then the third branch of SECAT's Blue Funds is the Blue Enterprise Fund, which is under development and under investigation at the moment, with the hope to be able to look at developing new options to grow the asset portfolio of SECAT over the next year. And as you can see, there have been a lot of partners involved in SECAT that have helped from the development of the MSP and the expansion of the marine protected areas, that helped work together to identify the opportunity for the debt swap, which is linked to the marine spatial planning and the marine protected area expansion, as well as the growth of new new blue bonds, as well as blue enterprise funds. That's all I have on there. I hope I've finished on time. I'll hand back over to Hervé.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for this very informative presentation and on the SECAT as well. The SECAT is really a very interesting mechanism in place which support the blue economy, the strategy, the blue economy, the blue strategy for blue economy in Seychelles, which has been endorsed by the government a few years ago, and it's becoming more and more prominent in the country. I would like to open now the question and answer session. You have two options to ask your question. If you're not very familiar with the webinar, you can click on the icon with the hand, so you can raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask your question live. Or the second option is to type your question and we will be able to read it for you. So open the floor for this question and answer session, which should last around 30 minutes. So I can see one question here. A written question. It's from Stewart Sarkozy. And the question, I'm going to read the text now. Thanks again. We are involved in a GEF GSP funding island resilience project in Pacific, pre-recovery labs, PIDF, GLISPA. Curious about three questions. The first question is it still heavily NPA-rated revenue tourism based in terms of financing stream? Sorry. What are the more diverse island resilience-related ways that this will get embedded when it comes to overall resident well-being, health, transportation, education, food system, disaster risk, circular economy? Is that where the funds come into play? Follow on. How do you measure impact against SDG? That was the question number one. Basically, is there other source of funding than tourism, right? And the second one, how do we, given the heavy tourism focus, how do you avoid over tourism that so many places, especially island and coastal area, have experienced? So is there a problem with the absorption capacity of tourism in specific areas? And the third question, will we be sharing the PowerPoint with attendees? All right, so yeah, I will be able to answer to the third question. Obviously, the PowerPoint will be available to all the participants, and we will. The webinar is recorded, and it will be posted on the Biodiversity Finance website, and you will have access that way to the PowerPoint presentation. Andrew, would you like to answer to the first question?
Yeah, sure. Okay, first question on other revenue sources that this is focused on tourism. Just to give a justification. So the reason this is focused on tourism is the two major sectors in Seychelles, the economic sectors in Seychelles, is tourism and fisheries. The existing protected area system for the marine protected areas are all no-take zones. The area of land available in Seychelles is very small. So, for example, it negates real significant financing opportunities for forestry revenue, for example. So that's why we focus on the tourism base. In terms of, are there other sectors where there is financing available for, because fisheries is the other largest sector in Seychelles, that's actually where SECAT, through the Blue Grants Fund, but also the Blue Bonds, really comes into play. What they're trying to do is to not just do business as usual, but try to encourage and to support business models which contribute towards the blue economy approach. So value addition within the fisheries sector, that also have a strong biodiversity background or environmental safeguards. So those are the reasons why Seychelles is focusing on tourism and fisheries as two sectors. For the over-tourism question?
Yeah, if do we reach over capacity, absorption capacity of tourism in some sites? Because if it's too many tourists in one site, it can have a negative impact.
Yes, issues about over-tourism is obviously a lot in the press recently and a significant concern. One of the areas where people have been quoting a lot is around carrying capacity. There are difficulties with notions of carrying capacity because it's not an absolute number. It's how those tourists, how they enter a protected area and the impact that they have. So, for example, you can have more tourists that have a lower impact if you have different type of activities that are available. So, for example, if you have good mooring in a marine protected area, you have less impact than if you have more boats on those moorings than if you had less vessels but no moorings. And so being able to control and monitor the way in which tourists come into a protected area is very important. So having very clearly cut routes through the protected area, if you have trails, for example, to ensure that tourists don't go off trails, having very clear warning signs around going off tracks. So there are examples where protected areas try and create clear roads where vehicles can go and they can't go off-road, and clear arguments. And so these are ways in which you can control how tourists move. The other question is whether you're getting an absolute number of too many tourists in Seychelles, which is a conversation that's being had in the country. And it will continue to be a conversation as we monitor the impact of tourists on the protected areas.
Thank you, Andrew. We got another question from Clara, which is it's related as well to tourism. How do you generate revenue apart from tourism? And I think Andrew already answered to this question to some extent, but I would like to add that another mechanism that exists in Seychelles is corporate social responsibility. Seychelles has introduced a corporate social responsibility tax a few years back. It's 0.5% on the turnover for companies that generate more than 1 million rupee per year. And the corporate had the option to give half of this 0.5% to NGOs working in the conservation sectors, and as well to the Seychelles National Park Authority. So there's quite a large amount of money going to support NGOs or government institutions managing protected area through this mechanism. I've got another question from Grace from DRC, which is again a similar question. Is the tourism the only mechanism which allows protected area to ensure self-revenue in Seychelles? So I think we tried to answer this question already. I don't know if there's other mechanism we didn't flag that you can think of, Andrew.
So within the expanded protected area system, because there will also be sustainable use zones, there are significant opportunities around within the fisheries sector, around aquaculture, which will enable a diversification of those revenue bases, which can then go back into co-management of those zones. Some organizations have also been very effective in reducing their costs by attracting volunteers that would like to improve their studies or complement their studies by taking conservation research programs. So a lot of the NGOs here offer that facility to universities to share their information, especially around marine protected areas. And that helps both as a contribution paid towards the conservation management, but it also helps in additional expertise and staffing for those protected areas.
Thank you. We got another more practical question from Clara again. could you send a link from the business model Dropbox? I think it's possible.
Yes, it's a short answer.
So you will put it. We will send it to Marco, and Marco will send it to all the participants. We got another question from. I will take somebody new. Because Clara is already 3 questions. So I'm going to take a question from Michel Macari. Are you exploring any linkage with the agriculture sector of the Seychelles? Any experience on agro-tourism?
The government of Seychelles and UNDP are currently developing a ridge to reef concept with Jeff that will start to look at aspects of agroforestry as well as non-timber forest products in order to involve communities much closer in conservation, especially in the terrestrial areas and in key biodiversity areas. So that's one aspect where they have worked. In terms of agro-tourism, that I don't know so much about, just because of the size of Seychelles and the size of the agricultural space in Seychelles is very small. If you look at a map of Seychelles, the space for large-scale agro areas is very small.
Yes, agriculture in Seychelles is not very developed, and most of our food is imported from overseas, and there is not many scope to develop agro-tourism like could be in other countries or exist in other countries.
If I could jump in, Hervé, I noticed that there was a question from Clara, but actually the start of what can a country do to start to identify its options. And what I would propose is having a protected area financing plan is a really useful tool to go through, where you can conduct a financial analysis of where the current revenues are, but also work through what options are available and are practical to a country, and also what are acceptable to the protected areas themselves. So whilst the number of options, the list of financing options is huge, those that are practical in a country are significantly reduced, and those that are acceptable for protected area authorities that they feel comfortable with implementing are further reduced. And the importance is because you're not just trying to generate revenue, you're trying to generate a change in the way of thinking of protected area agencies. It's important to try and first approach those that they can see the practical application with in front of them before developing the more abstract ones, which they maybe feel less comfortable with developing. So you can go through that approach.
Thank you, Andrew. We've got another question from Zoe. Did you face pushback from government or other stakeholders with respect to granting financial autonomy to SNPA? If so, how was this overcome?
It's a very good question. I think in all cases you will receive pushback, both actually from outside the organization as well as inside the organization. Remember, you're trying to encourage protected area management that have always been budget dependent to try something risky, which is difficult. Some stakeholders will have a principal objection to protected areas generating revenue. Some in the private sector will believe it is their job to generate revenue from the protected areas, not just the park and not the Parks Authority, where actually both parties can generate it. But interestingly, we got much stronger support from the Ministry of Finance than we thought, and we considered why that was the case, and we think it was because we answered their questions very frankly and we hopefully very clearly. So answering the questions that they want answered rather than what you think they want answered, if that makes sense. We have the tendency to try and bombard recipients with vast amounts of information and huge documents, where actually what they want is just a very logical step-by-step process that they trust. And that, I think, was helpful in our case.
Thank you. We got a question from Joely, and she wants to go back to the business case slide. And maybe Marco, you will be able to unmute Joely, like she can ask a question about this slide. Thank you.
Hi, Joely, you're on mute.
We are back on this slide. Maybe you can say a few words on the question you want to raise on that slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about this business case. It's quite interesting to look at it. In case, comparing it with us in Fiji. Thank you.
Okay, so if I understand your question, you'd just like me to go back over this slide and explain it a little bit more?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. What we were able, the reason to show the business case is we wanted to make it clear to government partners that historically the Parks Authority had generated more revenue in ticket sales than it had received in government budget support. So making one argument. The next argument was really, but we can show you where the inefficiencies are. And if you allow us to reduce or close those inefficiencies, this is how the revenue can increase. If you allow us to increase those inefficiencies, we can also improve the cost efficiency of how you collect revenue. Thereby, the bar goes up again. And so it's taken them through a step-by-step process to say, okay, now we can generate more revenue. Now we can save more money, but we will also go through a training to prove that we know how to use that money once we generate it. And finally, we will clearly show you how we take that revenue and put it into the parks and how we then improve the attractiveness of those parks to create opportunities, livelihood opportunities for Seychelles businesses. So we tried to then show the step-by-step process that said, we acknowledged here are failings, this is what we're going to do to put them in case. If we just showed we know how to make more money, I don't think that would have worked. And if we just showed how to create cost efficiency, it also wouldn't have worked. The government of Seychelles wanted to know that there could be behavioral change within the organization over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Did we answer your question, Joely?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question from Aline about SECAT. How did you mobilize all stakeholders, including the government of Seychelles, to adhere to this model of financial solution over another? In the absence of a trust fund, what other model of finance solution could have worked for conservation and climate adaptation in the Seychelles?
Okay, so the question on the model for SECAT, this was really supported by the Nature Conservancy, which have a lot of experience through its investment arm, NatureVest, which I think spent 4 years with the government explaining the different types of models and how they could work and how such a deal could be structured. There is a very good YouTube presentation given by Rob Weary from the Nature Conservancy, which explains very clearly not just how the model operates, but the process in which the Nature Conservancy went through with the government of Seychelles. So because it was one of the first, these do take a longer time as any initial first financing option in this area does. So that's the main one for there. And then the question was,
is there another model that could have worked?
Okay, I mean, the trust fund is just the mechanism. The debt swap is the financing option. So there could be different finance options which could still be channeled through a trust. The reason a trust is useful is in this regard, it's a public-private trust, so gains greater support both from the investment side of private investors to put money in, as well as from the residents and the government side and the protected areas, which would be recipients. So it creates a very transparent mechanism for how revenue funds can be channeled through and out. In terms of other options, increasingly Seychelles through the blue bonds is looking at impact investments. These are increasing in countries. This is probably one of the fastest growing areas where private capital funds are interested to invest in sustainable business models within protected area systems, which complement the existing activities and the IUCN categories of a protected area. But there's always concern from these impact funds of a pipeline of projects. So these would be opportunities in Seychelles to attract foreign investment into sustainable business models. But there's also the opportunity to attract private investment into something like a blue equity fund, which would help channel domestic investment into sustainable business models within protected areas. So whether these are sustainable use areas in developing aquaculture or sustainable fisheries management and improving and increasing fish stocks, for example.
Thank you very much. We got a question from Florence from UNDP Cameroon. And she says, I saw you had a strong focus on communication. The work you did, it's amazing. Is it possible to share your communication materials and the communication plan? What was the most effective communication activity in your point of view?
Okay, there's a bit of, if I go to the slide, there's a bit of explanation actually on the communication side. Which I think is really important. One, we provided a training to all protected areas on marketing, where we wanted somebody from a pure business side to be able to upgrade the skills of all the protected areas agencies to understand what is currently being used and how you can use analytics in the background to be able to inform a lot of your decisions around your communication. And that's something that private businesses are using now with their customers, but protected area agencies aren't that aware of. The communication tool that we're finding is most effective is, for Seychelles, it's Facebook for residents, communicating with residents. There is a huge growth in Facebook usage in the country, and this is how we can both communicate information around conservation, we can alert them to changes in the park, we can highlight issues about poaching, we can get communication materials into schools because the teachers are looking at it. But then also the tool for attracting more visitors to the parks or telling people what's going on in the parks is YouTube, and using short information videos that we can use across mediums. So limiting to 3-minute videos, where these can be cross-posted on your website, they can be on your YouTube channel, they can be on your Facebook feed, where people are really interested. And these are really important. We're trying to now develop YouTube videos or professional videos for all the protected areas, where these are can go into hotels. So visitors, as soon as they arrive in Seychelles, can see these and then can suddenly put into their list of, I want to visit all these different protected areas. External organizations can see very clearly what conservation activities are happening in the parks, as well as residents are seeing how the money generated is going to benefit this public resource. And I also have to give credit to a protected area finance project in UNDP Egypt, which is actually ahead of us in developing good communication materials, and they've got a very good team as well. And so sharing this information between UNDP GEF projects has been really helpful. And so this webinar is just another tool to try and share this information across. And we're happy to share any of the publications or any of the information materials that we develop.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. And I just wanted to highlight that recently was a tourism survey, and it indicates that most of the tourism coming to Seychelles, they are not aware about protected areas. They are not aware about all the endemic plants. They just come to Seychelles for the beach and the sea, but they are not aware of the beauty of this country. And only a fraction of the tourists coming to Seychelles go and visit protected areas. So there's a huge potential to increase tourists visiting protected area, and at the same time increasing revenue for protected area. We got another question from David. It's about cruise tourism. How significant is cruise tourism contribution to the sustainable financing of PA in the Seychelles? What is the potential of revenue and for Seychelles in that sector?
So the cruise ship tourism, they do visit specific protected areas. They visit some of the inner islands when they come, as well as Aldabra Atoll, which is the World Heritage Site in the outer islands. Cruise ship tourism did reduce in Seychelles as a result of the piracy that was happening a few years ago, but it has started to return. And so with the increase of visitation, cruise ship tourists, there are not a huge number of vessels, but when they do come, there's obviously a huge number of people within those vessels. So they do contribute. Hervé, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, cruise ship had disappeared for a few years because of a piracy issue with Somalia. In the past 2 years, there was no piracy incident anymore. So cruise ships are coming back. They're coming from Kenya, and they're cruising from Kenya to the Seychelles, then they carry on to Madagascar. And so cruise ship tourism, they dropped from 200 a year, and just last year it started to pick up again, and they recorded around 20,000 tourists coming from cruise ship. And I think the target for the next 2 years will be up to 50,000 per year. So potential are huge, and there's discussion ongoing with the government now to try to introduce cruise ship tax that could be used to finance biodiversity in general, but as well protected area. And government are talking about introducing a cruise ship tax for each tourist on board for $10. So if you multiply by 50,000, it could be a huge amount of money that could be used to finance biodiversity and protected area in Seychelles. We got another question from Daria. What is the ideal number of additional financial mechanism, for example, entrance fee, additional services sold by the PA, that should be used to generate additional revenue for the PA, and on which basis is the selection of this mechanism is made?
Okay, I've got a good slide that helps show that, which I might try and find. But the ideal number, it's an unanswerable question. You want to strike a mix between diversification, because if you just focus on one or two, then you have a shock, and then it has a significant impact on revenue collection. Trade it off against the transaction costs of creating and managing each new revenue mechanism. So I hope that kind of makes sense. It is a balance. One thing that's very important to take into consideration is if you think of an X and a Y axis, it would be the revenue that it would generate versus the complexity to implement and manage. And some of those will be quick wins. There'll be low amounts of revenue, but easily implemented and without having to require much management. And some will have the potential for generating significant revenue, but take 4 or 5 years to implement. So, for example, trying to develop a biodiversity offset program from scratch, as I understand from the BBOP program, takes approximately 5 years based on experience to implement. That would be in your longer term financing strategy. What's very important to do is to try and have a blended mix in there. Some options that you can start to develop that are easy to show change whilst leading up to your to your 5-year ones that will generate significant amount of revenues. Because, for example, you want to be able to show momentum and maintain that momentum. You show incremental change in the system, but also your framework conditions can change. And so what 5 years before seemed like the best option, things can change in 5 years. Elections can happen, economic systems can change where that's no longer viable. So putting all your eggs into that basket of that 1 or 2 options in 5 years' time is a risky move as well.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to diversify your source of revenue to reduce the risk and to ensure that you got a long-term sustainable financing option for the protected area. There is one aspect to look. The second aspect is to ensure that you got political support to do that, because without political support, usually it's very difficult to introduce new financing mechanism. The second aspect to look, it's a social impact. You have to make sure that whatever you do, it has not a negative social impact or against a gender, for example, or other community that could suffer for introduction of a specific financing mechanism. And thirdly, another criteria of selection is to ensure that whatever mechanism you put in place, it has a huge biodiversity impact. So you can have BIOFIN has developed a methodology to prioritize finance solution that can be used to prioritize finance solution for protected area. So I invite you to consult the BIOFIN workbook, which, if you are not familiar too, on the biodiversityfinance.net website. You can download it. It's in English, in French, and Spanish, and Russian. And I would like to say as well, we are about to launch a new version, 2018, which will be officially launched at the COP14 in a couple of weeks. I'm going through, I think we went through all the questions. Did we answer all your questions? Do you have any more questions? We've got another question from Ramon. It's regarding the online payment system. Can you elaborate in the last 2 bullet points? Operator, management system, and customer base. What will be the functionalities of those options?
On this slide, operator, management system, and customer base. Okay, so if you can, no, you can't see my cursor. If you can see my cursor, you can see I'm circling what is called an operator login. The idea is to allow all operators to be able to log in with their own password and to be able to book their tickets for their guests. In that system, they will be able to see over the last 2, 3, 4 years which parks they have visited, with how many guests, and how the tickets have been validated, so that they can historically go back and say, I can see how the visitors that use my business prefer different parks to the other ones. And so he can start to tailor his marketing to try and push the parks that his guests are more demanding of. He can also feed that back to the Parks Authority to say, for example, my guests don't want to be going into the terrestrial parks. They're more interested in the marine parks. And then the Parks Authority can use that information. So we're trying to give something back that helps improve the operator's business. On the customer database, when you book a ticket, it creates an option, or we email the ticket to the customer, but it gives the option to say, would you like would you like to be kept up to date of what's going on in the park, or would you like to do a customer survey? We can then use that information to email a customer satisfaction survey, as well as then build a database where every time there is a change in the park, or a significant intervention, like for example, there is turtle hatching, or we've just done reintegration of new bird species, we can email all of our previous customers that want to be contacted. And then that creates an opening for people to have a connection with the protected areas and then to be able to donate later on. So the idea is also to create a donation portal where we invite people to become friends of the Seychelles Parks authorities, or that they could do adoption schemes where they either do adopt a reef or adopt a tortoise, for example, which they don't physically adopt them, it's a symbolic adoption by donating money, and then they receive information how that's growing. So at the moment, the Parks Authority send out a newsletter into the ether, into a few email addresses, but here we can start to target based on people's nationalities, based on their interests. We can know which protected areas they've been to. So if they visited a specific marine park, we can then tell them how that marine park's doing. And we start to build a global interest in the Seychelles PA system.
Thank you. I think we got a few more questions. Dernier question from Guillaume. Do you think that this approach is replicable at a smaller scale? Sometimes states are not open to such a plan, but individual protected areas are. Do you think a business plan could be used at the scale of one protected area? Do you think that this approach is replicable at a smaller scale? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. A large proportion of business plans are developed for single protected areas. The reason we developed a financing plan for the whole system is because we take a system level approach, and then we developed institutional plans for organizations developing multiple protected areas. But yes, you can very easily take the approach and apply it to a single protected area. There is a good tool, I think, used through MedPan, which is the the Mediterranean Marine Protected Area Network, and they have an online financial planning tool, which is very useful as well.
Okay, we are going to take one last question from Ronto. Which nationality is most interesting to visit the marine protected area in Seychelles, and what is the percentage of the blue economy in the global economy of Seychelles?
The first one I think was which nationality is most, so which nationality do we have of tourists?
Yeah.
I am going to hazard a guess at French. Hervé's going to have to help me here.
Well, we don't have this detail, but we know that the main tourist market for Seychelles is the German first, followed by French and Italian. I'm not too sure, this is a global figure, but I'm not too sure if there's any analysis who shows which one goes to marine protected area. I don't think it's been done so far.
No, that's correct. And then the second part of the question is, what is the contribution of the blue economy to the to the entire economy?
Yeah.
This is a difficult question because the blue economy really does capture all economic sectors in Seychelles, because we are a small island state surrounded by vast marine resources. The blue economy really does capture everything. It is not just within the Seychelles definition of blue economy, it's not just the ocean. It also includes area of the terrestrial side, because it's connected. So I would hazard a guess at more than 90%.
It's not too clear. Okay, I think we reached our time. It's exactly 6:15 in Seychelles. We would like to thank you for participating to this BIOFIN webinar. We hope that we were able to answer to all your questions. You will find more information regarding this webinar on the Biodiversity Finance website, which include the recording of this session, plus a link to a business model and other information related to that project. Thank you very much again for attending this BIOFIN webinar. Bye-bye.